In 2019, we're celebrating 100 years of Bauhaus, especially in Weimar, Berlin, and Dessau.
Tassilo Speler loves introducing visitors to the Bauhaus school and to Dessau, where the Bauhaus had its most important creative phase. Between 1925 and 1932, Bauhaus architects ushered in a new era of building with their simple and functional designs.
As an art historian, coming to Bauhaus Dessau every day is wonderful. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, an icon of modernism. It spreads ideas in design, construction, and art across the world.
The renowned architect Walter Gropius designed the central building, which served mainly as an educational building. Today it houses the museum and headquarters of the Dessau Bauhaus Foundation. Tassilo Speler is fascinated by the architecture and the revolutionary design language, evident here in the cafeteria.
These steel tube chairs are by Marcel Breuer. They were quite special back then, and still are. Back then, a theater or a cafeteria had comfy seating. People found the steel chairs rather strange back then.
This window construction was also a novelty at the time. They're characteristic of the way that Bauhaus design married form and function. The Bauhaus complex was not only a workspace. Tassilo Speler leads us over to the studio building, which included small apartments on several floors of the building.
This is the Preller House in the Bauhaus studio building. The Bauhaus students slept here almost a century ago, in 1926, in these rooms. If you want to relive what it was like to be a Bauhaus student or artist, you can come here to see the Bauhaus and sleep here.
After a night in the Bauhaus studio, guests can pay a visit to some of the other World Heritage sites in the area. First, we go to Wittenberg, a drive of about 45 minutes. Wittenberg bears its mantle as the city of Luther with pride. Martin Luther, the Protestant reformer, lived and worked in Wittenberg. His ideas went on to change the world. The castle church is just one of the UNESCO heritage sites. In 1517, Luther is said to have nailed his 95 theses to the door here. There's also the town church where Luther preached for many years. The home of his friend and fellow reformer, Philip Melanchthon. And the Luther House where Martin Luther lived with his family. Today, it's a museum of Reformation history. Tassilo Speler brings us to the heart of the house.
These rooms belong to Martin Luther. Almost 500 years ago, this is where Luther lived, along with his family and many guests. This is the Luther room, where he received his guests, including his students and his family. His wife was the only woman allowed to take part when they talked about theses and the Reformation over wine and beer.
The museum has the famous Kranach portraits of Luther and his wife Katharina, as well as Luther's original pulpit from the town church, and the first Bible, which Luther the Reformer translated from Latin into German. About 30 minutes away, we come to the third World Heritage Site. The Garden Kingdom of Dessau-Wörlitz was named a World Heritage Site in 1997. Created by Leopold III, the Duke of Anhalt-Dessau, the gardens helped revolutionize landscape architecture. His gardens reflected the principles of the Enlightenment. A church and a synagogue were built in view of one another to exemplify tolerance. The gardens were intended as a place of education for ordinary people.
Behind me is the rock island built for the Duke by Erdmannsdorf, the architect. It was also educational, designed to look like Mount Vesuvius in Italy for people who couldn't go themselves. It's a beautiful place, and once a year they stage an artificial volcano eruption here.
The gardens of Dessau-Wörlitz, the city of Wittenberg. and Bauhaus Dessau were all places of intellectual transformation. To this day, they inspire visitors with their history and beauty.